The name of the game is, particularly in small gloves, you can't make mistakes. We made a mistake, and Nassourdine, I would say, with his team, recognised when we made that mistake, and he jumped on it, which means they had to have planned. So you've got to congratulate them for that. Obviously there was Izzy got poked in the eye. There was a break. Izzy didn't want to take the break, was just keen to get on with it. But in doing that, he didn't reset as you normally would and create some space. That means you're still in the firing zone, and then you wanted to keep the pressure on. And that's just one of those things that just happens. He felt he was doing well in the fight and wanted to keep that pressure on. And Nassourdine caught him switching. Beautiful right hand. He couldn't recover from that. It was right on the button. Then he followed up with a left hook against the cage. And then the referee came in and stopped it. So what do? We're just gutted, but we got nothing to complain about. No, he just got flicked in the eye. It does put you off momentarily. He could see clearly enough when it came to reset. It's just one of those things that you've got to be very careful. An experienced pro will cramp the distance when a referee breaks something. And you have to make sure that you create your own space, you reset, or you circle back to center ring or whatever. If you're in the heat of the moment, you want to put the pressure on, which is what happened. That's just what happens. It's just a fight. At the end of the day, it's just a fight.
Israel Adesanya's coach, Mike Angove, talked about Adesanya and what went wrong in their fight. Pretty much just he made a mistake. Switching stance without creating space, as he said, was the opening that Nassourdine Imavov needed in order to land that big right overhand. Adesanya was in southpaw, he reached out with his lead hand, trying to create space by pushing Imavov away, but he didn't confirm the space. He switched into orthodox without throwing any punch, without throwing any feint. He just switched, and every second counts as a game of inches. Him switching like that gave Imavov the signal to blitz him down and knock him out. Now, Adesanya's coach said that there's no excuses. He didn't say it was a bad stoppage. He even talked about the eye poke and said that Adesanya was fine. It wasn't really that much of an eye poke. It kind of just grazed him. And he wanted to get back into the fight without breaking, I guess, the rhythm of the fight, because Adesanya was doing well. He wanted to stay in there, not break up the action long, got right back into the fight. It didn't really affect the fight according to Adesanya's coach. And it seemed that way. If the eye poke was damaging, it'd be hard for Adesanya to tough his way through that, because eye pokes can affect the fighter a lot. So for him to get right back into the fight showed that the eye poke really wasn't anything. I don't think he was thinking about Alex Pereira. I saw a lot of memes about that. He did the reverse Alex Pereira, pushed the referee off and they got knocked out instead of knocking his opponent out, but I doubt he was thinking about that at all. It's in the heat of the moment. It's in the fight. Second round, the blood's flowing. He felt like he was good from the eye poke. He wanted to get right back into the fight, switch stances at the wrong time, and Imavov capitalized beautifully. That's what this game is all about. When you see a knockout, it's usually a fighter making a mistake and the other fighter capitalizing on that mistake. But has Adesanya done that before, where he was in southpaw and switched stances, giving the opponent that opening? He has done that a few times. He did it against Sean Strickland and Dricus. Neither of them really capitalized on that moment in the first two rounds the way Imavov did, and I think it's because Imavov knew that's what Adesanya does sometimes. Maybe he watched the Strickland Dricus fights and drilled that in the training camp, that's something Adesanya could do in the fight, where he's constantly switching stances from southpaw to orthodox. And there's many examples of it, from the Alex fight to the Dricus fight. He has switched stances in many different ways, like here against Alex in southpaw and the opponent's in the orthodox stance. All of these guys are in orthodox that he's fighting. He's reaching with the lead hand, southpaw, switches stances backwards, creating space away from Alex. Or here in the southpaw stance, Alex is the one that moves away, and then he switches stances after. So not only does he need to create space, but even if his opponent creates enough space, he knows it's safe enough to switch stances. And then he feints after, getting Alex on the defensive. Or he'll switch stances when the opponent throws a feint or an attack forward. He moves back while switching stances, almost like taking a big step back, creating a lot more space. He does that a lot. He'll either just create enough space to move backwards, or he'll even switch stances to move out on angles and exit away from the cage laterally. Here he switches stances backwards and then feints forward immediately with a knee, getting Alex on the defensive. Whenever he's feinting like this after he switches stances, he's stopping the opponent from attacking him, which is something he didn't do against Imavov. Here again, Alex is the one that moves out, right angle, and Adesanya uses that space in order to switch stances safely. Or he'll even throw a kick from southpaw, so he's extending with his lead arm, throws a left kick high, gets Alex on the defensive, and afterward switches stances into orthodox, throws a jab after, keeping Alex consistently on the defensive. And here against Dricus, from southpaw he feints the left kick, gets Dricus to react heavily, he moves back, and because of that, Adesanya was able to switch stances into orthodox. Or he throws the left straight from southpaw, gets Dricus to move back and switch stances himself. Adesanya mirrors it, switches into orthodox, and then moves away from Dricus on an angle. Here he switches stances against Dricus backwards at a right angle, and Dricus also switches stances at the same time. He's one of the few fighters that was switching as Adesanya was too. Now here is one of the times where Adesanya just switches in place, very similar to the way he did against Imavov. He stands in front of Dricus, switches stances, and brings his left hand forward. Dricus thought this was going to be some kind of jab or some kind of attack, and he's the one that ducks under the hand and moves out on an angle, defensively sound there. But there was an opening, just like with the Imavov fight, that Dricus could have landed the right overhand right there, just like Imavov did, right? Because even against Imavov, when he switched stances, he did extend his hands forward, but Imavov knew that that was not going to be an attack from Adesanya. It was most likely just Adesanya extending just to use his reach, to keep the opponent away. And here against Sean Strickland, same thing. He switches stances away to create space, and he did that a lot in that fight because Strickland was constantly moving forward the whole fight. And while he's in orthodox, Adesanya throws a jab forward just to keep him off momentarily. Left straight from Adesanya, Strickland moves away from the punch, and that's what you constantly see from Adesanya throughout that fight. Switching stances backwards to create more space, whether it's on an angle, whether it's straight back. But interesting enough, Strickland was able to time the stance switch of Adesanya when Adesanya was moving to his left while extending that right hand forward. Sean Strickland throws a jab and then a right straight laterally. It's very similar to what you saw with Ilya Topuria versus Alexander Volkanovski, where Ilya was throwing punches while also moving out sideways. That's what Strickland does here as well. He throws a jab and then a right straight, and he's moving to his right while throwing those punches, cutting off the cage from Adesanya, and knew how to time the stance switch right there. But nobody capitalized on this better than Nassourdine Imavov. The thing about some of these rising contenders is they study the long-reigning champions. They study the legends more than anybody else. Imavov probably knew Adesanya's game better than anyone Adesanya's ever fought before, just because he's been watching him fight for so long. That has been the champion ever since Imavov even came into the UFC, which is crazy to think about. Israel Adesanya was the middleweight champion even when Nassourdine Imavov made his UFC debut in 2020. Adesanya first won the belt in 2019. Imavov made his UFC debut a month after Adesanya knocked out Paulo Costa. And that's why I have to get a lot of credit to these guys who held the belt for a long time, because they are constantly going up against fighters who've been watching every single one of their fights, looking up to them to fight them one day, learning from their fights, and that is the guy that they have targeted their entire careers. Israel Adesanya, Anderson Silva, GSP, Jose Aldo. I mean, Jose Aldo's still beating ranked fighters today. I mean, he beat Mario Batista, lost on the scorecards. I thought he won the fight. You know, Demetrius Johnson, all these other fighters, when they lose to the next generation, a lot of fans today look at it as like, oh, they just got destroyed and they're not as good as these guys. Of course, man. That's just how the sport goes. It's so hard to stay on top for that long, right? Imavov capitalizing and beating Adesanya faster than anyone's ever done before. He's been wanting to fight Adesanya ever since his UFC debut. It's natural for legends like Adesanya to lose to fighters like Imavov. That's just the evolution of the sport. Fighters come up, they learn from the legends of the game, they beat the legends, and they themselves might even become the future champions. Now, that's not to say Imavov will be the champion. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It's going to be competitive with those top guys because the middleweight division is now in a new era. Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland, even though he has been fighting for a long time, he's hit his prime in this era. Nassourdine Imavov, Hamza Chimaev, Caio Borralho. We'll see with Anthony Hernandez and Bo Nickel, but these top fighters seem to be the new era of the middleweight division. Dricus, Strickland, Imavov, Hamza, and Borralho. Adesanya, Whitaker, Cannonier, Vittori, Costa, that era has been replaced. And honestly, I think the new middleweights are better because most of them are well-rounded, right? They're not really just strikers or just wrestlers. And I think most of them are fighting at a higher skill level, even compared to the Weidman and Rockhold era, which I would think is like the second best era now after this one because of how well-rounded those guys were.